Hi there. Hi, Dimitri. How are you doing?
Hi, Maris. I'm good. Thanks.
Oh,
Thank you for having me here.
Nice to have you, man. How's Corona affecting you?
It's just the shitty old beer.
Really?
Yeah, I'm just joking. But yeah,
Do you miss going out or something?
just kind of crazy being cooked up in here all the time.
Really?
Yeah, so it's getting to me a little bit.
Whoa,
It's
yeah.
like for my past few years, I've been getting myself, well, not for a few years. Like before I came to uni, I've been like working on myself to try to not be as closed up and actually enjoy going out and enjoy doing things outside my room, if that makes sense. And now it's kind of biting me in the back.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that because I'm more of a person who just likes to sit at home, and
Yeah.
I didn't feel that much of an impact. But especially when you had the society, tell me more about that. Like a president of.
Oh yeah, well, just before that I stepped down as president, but I was still chilling around and seeing what's going on. Basically, the only problem that we need to resolve now is the AGM, which I actually should probably ask them about this again, because I'm not sure I've seen anything, as in the current administration of the society.
Okay.
But yeah, it seems like we're just going to be having like an online AGM like everyone else, and make sure that people send in their submissions so we can actually get a committee for next year. Oh, for those of you that don't know, AGM is annual general meeting where we decide on the next committee, well, the committee for next year.
And I assume you have to have a committee because otherwise there's no society.
Yeah,
something like that.
If you do not have the at least 4 members of committee which have specific roles, the committee cannot be re-affiliated with TISA. So you have to have it, and you also have to have minutes of AGMs, meaning almost a transcribed version of the AGM meeting every year. If you do not get, if you don't hand in the minutes, then it will be then your society technically is not official, if that makes sense. Yeah, I've actually had this problem last time because the previous secretary, which is the person that takes the minutes, has gone AFK for the whole summer, and I could not get the minutes off of her. So we actually had to emergency all gather together at the beginning of the third year, and recreate the AGM again and get another set of minutes and then submit that. So that was a bit of a wacky deal.
It's just all these legalities and stuff.
Yeah, basically. Which makes sense. They're there for a reason.
To control you?
Well, bureaucracy.
I guess we can talk more.
Bureaucracy looks like it's a bad thing, but it was made for a reason, because otherwise you can't really have big structures working nicely together.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
Just by the word of it, by people like saying, yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, exactly.
That. I guess we can talk about control a bit more, because you're one of the Linux enthusiasts in our friend group, I guess.
You could say that, yes. Linux evangelists.
Yeah, one of the main persons who are rooting for everything open source and stuff. I guess
one of them.
Yeah, I guess you could want to talk a bit about what it is, like at all, like what's open source software and what's free software, because despite, for example, free open source software being free, it's not like free financially. Like, for example,
not necessarily,
but yeah, so it's not necessarily free financially. And so what does the word free mean then?
Well, in this case, to quote Richard Stallman, free as in freedom, not as in price. Yeah, not as in gratis, as he says. And it's basically the freedom to do what you want with the code base, rather than, because let's say you download a piece of software and the software is free, as in it's gratis. This doesn't necessarily mean that you can do what you want with it. For example, each piece of software that you download might come with a EULA agreement, an end user agreement that says do not hack the software or whatever other restrictions, right?
Yeah.
It could even be things such as if you're a business, you need to pay, but if you're an individual, it can be free, right? So many pieces of software did the same thing. So basically, it means that this agreement doesn't really exist. So you can take that code base and do what you want with it. And then outside that realm, there is, not outside, but within the same realm, there's different segregations between different I'm not even sure what you'd call them, different types of free and open source. So, for example, we have the GPL, so different licensing. So we have the GPL licensing. We have, I'm not even sure what the Linux one is anymore. It's escaping my mind right now.
What is it? The MIT license? No, it's not. It's the GPL3 license, isn't it? Or is it?
No, sorry, it is. So Linux is on GPL2, and then GPL-v2. And then there's GPL-v3 as well, and there's actually quite a bit of controversy between the two. But to put it in a nutshell, they're basically a set of rules. And the set of rules basically say what you can and cannot do with this software. Meaning that, so in this case, the GPL in general says things along the lines of, right, do what you want to the software, but you do not need to, you're not really held responsible. So you can't really hold anyone responsible about the software. So if the software doesn't work, you can't go and sue someone. However, if you decide to take the software and modify it, let's say you're a company and needs to do one very specific thing, you can take the software, patch it, as in update it so it has all of the features that you need, but then you need to take that code and push it back upstream, meaning you have to push it back to whatever organization, company, individual is that made the software first off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's sort of, if you developed some sort of a calculator, then someone decided to add functionality, they would sort of have to give you back the contribution. Is that correct?
Either that or fork the project, meaning you have to take the project, literally copy that code base into your own code base, and then have it be a different project, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know. I could technically fork Linux and then call it Matrix. I don't know. And then do what I want with it.
And so, the application is free for you because you basically have the source code. So
yes.
However, you can compile it yourself, basically.
Yeah. However, it doesn't necessarily need to be free. It is in free from free money, because many times you will need some sort of a support over this. I guess you could even look at it in terms of, you're providing your users with support because you're compiling the application yourself and then distributing the binaries.
Yeah. I
guess that could be seen as a form of support. So then if you want the form of support, you could possibly charge them for that. Although usually that's not happening. But usually a form of support would be, right, I'm making this free and open source content management system like Ghost or like Nextcloud or something like that, and I'm distributing for free. But then if you're, let's say, a company and needs to have an expert somewhere that knows a lot about this software, or this could even be an individual, doesn't need to be a company, but let's say a company needs wants to use this piece of software and needs an expert to know what the software is doing, or to be able to troubleshoot problems, they could go to the company that made the product and request support and be billed monthly, annually, once, or however the support item works on their end.
Yeah, it's usually the enterprise that are going for the...
One good example for this is actually Red Hat. So Red Hat Linux, it's the very popular distribution of Linux, and many times and same with Ubuntu, as in Canonical, the company will go to them and be like, right, we'll download your OS for free. However, we need an expert to be able to help us with it. So they will just pay for it as well. So they're rather than paying for the software directly, they're paying for the expert helping them out, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So not the code base itself.
No.
I have used Red Hat Linux once, I think, but it was only for a MATLAB exam, and I don't know.
That's odd.
Probably doesn't change. These distributions, do they differ much from each other?
Not really. You can boil them down a lot. And one way you can boil them down is by looking at Arch, because if you know anything about Arch Linux, is that the whole point of it is so you can download and configure each package that goes on your system. So the way to install is that you literally boot up from the USB drive into a terminal, then you mount all the drives inside the computer, and you start installing all the necessary stuff like grub that boots up your OS, systemd that bootstraps everything in your OS, or other pieces of software that are core to the system for it to work. Then from there, you can start installing other components that might be useful, and then you can configure them and do what you want with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you basically take that component away, you can basically look at the difference between distributions as being just a difference between packaging systems. So your Red Hat distributions like Fedora or CentOS will use, actually, wait, am I mixing them up? I might be mixing them up. But something like Fedora, they will use Yum, I think it's called. I'm not too sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. Yeah. So this is their package manager, and then Debian systems will have apt-get. Arch-based systems will have Pacman, so on and so forth. So that's basically what it boils down to. So, for example, I use primarily Manjaro, which is based on Arch,
mm-hmm.
And the reason why I use that is because of the packaging system. And the reason why the packaging system is superior in Arch is because the one you have basically just a couple repositories in terms of you have the core stuff that you just get from the actual distribution itself. Which has all your base stuff, all your base packages, and then you have what they call the community repository as well. And the community repository is truly a treasure trove because it's managed by the community and not the actual project itself. And the reason why this is amazing is because basically anyone can add packages there. So you'll end up having the latest updates to packages and the most amount of packages on that system. Whereas if you compare it to something like Debian with apt-get, you can add your own repository and host your own repository, but then you need to add an extra repository. So then as a user, let's say you've used an Ubuntu system for half a year or a year, you can end up having like 20, 30 repositories that you just either forgot to delete or actually need all of them. So that can be quite cluttering. And many times, some of those repositories will either go offline or be inaccessible, or maintenance will stop or whatever.
Yeah. I was also going to ask a quick thing about just coming back to selling stuff.
Selling?
Yeah. For example, I open up Spotify, and it is a paid service. Well, basically, their app, and I'm sure that, the subscription service and paying for songs is, you pay because of the content that they provide and not the application.
Amount of content,
yeah, or not the application itself. But usually these software, like, you go to their settings, I click on this third-party software, and then they provide a huge list of open source files and code bases, or however you actually call them.
So that's actually another clause in the GPL licenses. And basically what it means is that if let's say you make some sort of a library in, let's say, JavaScript, because that's what Spotify uses.
Mm-hmm.
If you make some sort of a library that let's say makes it more efficient to do API requests, and then you license it under GPL, the different companies or other applications that will end up using it. So let's say I made this library. Now you, as a company, you go to make X piece of software which uses my library.
Yeah. Because
my library is under the GPL code base, you need to go and reference it down and give it credits. A very good example that I can give you of this is if you go into your router's admin page. So most routers will have some sort of administration page where you can log in as an admin and do port forwarding and find out who's on your network, that kind of stuff. If you find out the about page in your router, you will actually see the Linux operating system there. And the reason that is because Linux is just amazing when it comes to networking and very lightweight, which is because routers are basically just computers, but very, very, not powerful at all.
Oh.
So they basically just take really bad CPUs, put Linux on them, put some custom software and some tables for routing, and they basically and you have a router.
Yeah, I have Coilwine in mine, actually. don't know if it's called a coil wine, but
Where it buzzes.
yeah, and
Most likely coil one, yeah.
yeah, and this starts happening once you start downloading something. So if there's and
that's coil one.
because my router's close, I could hear them just like ramping up.
I have a similar problem with my laptop. So like if my laptop starts running like quite a heavy load or something like that, you'll definitely hear the coil whine, because the coil whine is not just something that's either on or off. Sometimes it can be very subjective. So sometimes you'll get coil whine when the system is being stressed too much, or sometimes you'll just get it because the system is on. I have the same problem in my monitor and just on 24/7, but luckily I have headphones.
Yeah, I've heard that happen in my sister's mechanical keyboard, I think.
Mechanical keyboard?
Yeah, it's probably a bit different, but it's with the lights controller. So
okay, that makes sense, because that actually does consume power.
So it's not Linux, it's not an operating system, but
lighting is bloat, man. RGB is bloat.
Everything is bloat. What about freedom, though? Excessive.
Yeah, man, that's bloat. It's too much that we can do.
No, but isn't trying to free yourself in every single category a bit too excessive?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that we can actually look at the Bible here, and I know this is a weird way to go, but bear with me for a second.
No, yeah, people quote that book, and
And I mean that in the metaphorical sense.
Yeah.
So like when Adam and Eve, they were in the Garden of Eden, they were in the paradise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden they wanted to get more freedom, and getting more freedom that meant biting the apple. So since then they were responsible of their own mortality and freedom, if that makes sense. Yeah. And same thing here. Now freedom means that basically people can do things that suck, right? You can be a dictator and then not give your people any freedom and have your people do only the absolute best things for humanity, which could be good, although not realistic, because no dictator would ever do that. And then the moment you are to give your people freedom, they would start smoking, drinking, cheating on each other, killing, raping, whatever bad things, because people are bad.
Yeah, I've heard.
And not just that, but also means making your own, having the freedom to make your own mistakes as well.
Yes, I've heard this interesting thing about creativity, and it was just recently said. I think even on Joe Rogan's podcast with some expert. Bro Jogan. So he mentioned something about how China. Well, we're literally just throwing it out there, yeah, China. But not necessarily. It's just the regime is oppressive, so that's why people are not really generating new ideas. You know how I've noticed that was sort of, they can force you to generate ideas, but you're not gonna. Like, they can tell you,
you can't even be forced to generate ideas, because it doesn't make sense. Because usually the people that are going to be in power, they're not going to be someone that's people that are very creative. So when you put people that are not creative in power, and then you can't just expect them to go to someone else and be like, yo, be creative, because that's not how it's going to work. Because
but the thing is that the person will say that. It's like, yo, I need the best engineers, I need the best this, create me the new world.
But this is what it is an engineer creative, because this is a bit of a different. So my point is that in an authoritarian system, in order for it to be semi-successful, like China is, you need to be able to define specific parameters for each person's actions, and you cannot define specific parameters for creativity.
Okay.
If that's what I'm saying. So if you look at USSR, the reason, like, the moment the USSR fell down, what did the West find out? The West basically found out that they were like 50 years back.
Okay.
So
as much as they were lying about everything, but
50 years back in technology and culture and everything else.
Okay.
In fact, the only thing that they were really able to advance with was nuclear technology, going to the moon, so space travel, and army technology. But even near the end, that wasn't really advancing very much. If you look at everything else, that wasn't really a thing. Like, another example in the same sort of realm is the internet. How creative did you need to be in order to create the internet? To create this vast web of networks? And look where it was created. Like, it was created in America, in a country that was known for its freedom. Now that's a debate whether the extent that they had freedom, but it's still relatively free compared to what USSR was at the time,
Yeah.
So someone saw that, oh wait, hold on a second, there's a problem with the current communication system. It can literally just be taken down overnight with one blast, right? And then someone had the creativity to go and fix it. Whereas in a state where literally condemnates creativity, you cannot really spawn that, if that makes sense. So the only way to make things, the only way to progress humanity forward is to define specific parameters for the progression, which is almost impossible because you do need to be a bit creative if you're working on the bleeding edge of technology.
Yeah, I guess that's how the freedom starts to come in here. And the freedom that they have in the US. I'm looking at a table of the most patent grants in 2018. That's I think it's just like since 2009 or so. So it's like in a time frame. The US is actually in the second place. But
second place of what again? Sorry.
Patent grants. Patents, as in like you
just creating patents.
Yeah, you created something. So I assume that creating a patent usually means that you have innovated at least something. Yeah. So looking at the numbers, China is actually in the first place, but
that's because China is just granting it to everyone.
That, and then there's so many people, and then now think 430,000 patents. That's what China has. The United States, on the other hand, has 307,000. So it's like it's not that far back, but
it's not. But the thing about that is that it's the misinformation, because sure, maybe they do have the 400,000 patents, but that doesn't mean that they actually have that many in terms of, no, they would, but my point is that they could easily, like those you go to USA and then you want to patent the invention of the phone, you won't be able to do that because already someone else already has that, even if that someone else would have the patent in a different country, because different countries in the West would collaborate together and be like, let's not infringe on each other's patents. However, in China, you can get away with that. If you're in China, you can go and patent that as long as no one else in China has that patent.
Really?
Which is why you can get away with so much. Which is why China can get away with so much intellectual theft, because China is known for creating all of the fakes in the world.
Yeah, gotta admit that. That's an interesting view. Yeah, but that means that US has way higher quality patents. And
basically. And also, you could look at it actually in another way. So take all of the Western countries in the world, sum them up, sum their patents up, and then compare it to China. That would be a better way of looking at it, although still not very good way, because again, in the West, we don't really infringe on each other's patents because countries would be like, let's not do that, right? Or if they do grant patents, at least one person from one country can go and sue another person from another country, or something along those lines. I'm not a lawyer, don't quote me. But it's somewhere along those lines. So they have a good relation. The different countries would have a good relation on this. Whereas in China, they just won't care. They will steal the patents from US and UK and Canada and insert ex-Western country and just produce it themselves.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, and for all we know, it could also be the fact that they have a ton of people there. Like, what is it, 1.6 billion, 2 billion, something like that?
Yeah, that's just a lot of them in there, yeah.
Let's have a look. Chinese population 2020. Oh, wait, they reached 1 billion a long time ago. That was in 82.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that was 1 billion in 82. I didn't realize it was this far back.
Ooh, so their current population is 1.3 billion. Yeah, well, not even nuts. Current, that's 3 years ago.
Yeah. Current probably lower, right?
Oh man. Honestly, I don't know where this all is heading with all this freedom. So we are seeing this example about how empowering people and giving their freedoms, well, talking about any sort of freedom, maybe just quoting the First Amendment, first of all, it's just like to have the freedom of press, have a freedom of speech, religion, expression, stuff like that. But people really don't trust the government in these states.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And that's for the best, to be honest. you shouldn't be trusting of your government, because the moment you're trusting, there'll be someone that gets elected through a democratic process or for a non-democratic process, like we have sometimes in Eastern Europe, and then he will come in there and take advantage of that trust.
Okay. Yeah.
Because right now, like, everyone's trusting their governments with what they're doing when it comes to Corona. And I'm not necessarily saying that what they're doing is good or bad. In fact, I'm not saying that at all. Maybe it is good, maybe it is bad. But just this blind trust without possibly critiquing some of all of the world's government's movements when it comes to dealing with this is a bit too dubious, because then they can just take advantage of it.
Yeah.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, someone during George Bush's administration said, never let a tragedy go to waste, meaning take advantage of every tragedy to gain more and more control.
Really? Whoa.
Yeah, like, for example, after 9/11, they passed the Patriot Act, that's what's it called, which basically is the act that lets all of these state agencies basically perform warrantless spying on their citizens, or the correct phrase would be warrantless mass surveillance. And they do that, and we have the Snowden leaks to prove that, and more than that. In UK, we have something similar. I believe it's just called the Terrorist Act or something like that, and it's been put in through after. I'm kind of not very sure of the circumstances here, but I believe this Terrorist Act was put in place after a bunch of IRA attacks in England. But don't quote me on that. I'm not too sure.
Yeah. But so it means something happens, some tragedy. Yeah. Something that people are afraid of, and then the government says that we're going to help you.
So the people are afraid of something, we'll help you, give us your rights. Yeah.
Oh, so the surveillance and all this, coming back to this Cambridge Analytica scandal, what was that about? Is there any...
Oh, Cambridge Analytica was just simply to do with Facebook giving API access to different developers. So Cambridge Analytica scandal was basically Facebook saying, right, we have all of this database, and we just created an API endpoint for all of you to be able to use it. Feel free.
Wow.
That's basically what it was, but I'm generalizing it heavily.
Yeah, but so is it piggybacking on the thing that allows, the Patriot Act, or is it not? Is it just... Oh, no, because that's not the government surveilling you.
No, it's not. It's just private enterprise surveilling. However, they are heavily in bed with the government, since the government isn't doing that much about it. Like, you bet your ass that if the government wants to spy on someone and they see that they have a Facebook history, they'll go to Facebook and ask for their history. And I'm 99% sure that Facebook will just say yes to anything, because they have nothing to lose.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing they don't have to lose is reputation in front of the public. But I don't think they really care about that much, because they already own the public. They own the monopoly.
Oh, God, yeah.
There's like two of the internet's most reputable social medias, not reputable, popular, Instagram and Facebook, both owned by Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, both the same.
Like, yeah, it's like that's interesting. Kind of makes you wonder there a little bit, doesn't it?
I mean, guy's a pioneer. He knows how to connect people, I guess. Do you
still the same idea as MySpace?
Well, he accomplished it. So, right, wait, I had a train of thought about... So do you think that they, go and implement these features? And who is implementing them? Well, there has to be a developer at the very end of the chain sitting there and just writing the code, which,
The code spying people, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean...
someone has to be sitting there and literally, coding...
Yeah,
coding that.
Yeah, of course. And, I mean, why wouldn't they? You're getting paid to do a job, you're doing a job. However, there's also ways to obfuscate that. And we know some of these ways from Google's Project Dragonfly, if you ever heard about that.
Actually not. What is that?
Project Dragonfly was basically Google's project to basically collaborate with China on their own search, their own spying apparatus. So basically, China just contracted Google to help them out with something, right?
Ooh.
And then Google called that project Project Dragonfly. At least it's known as Project Dragonfly.
Okay.
And if you search for it, you should find a lot of articles of people getting pissed off and developers not literally protesting and all of that stuff. But basically, what they were doing is that they would have not even proper teams, but they would take the developers and they would give them specific assignments of code. And then you develop that code and you do not know what it's for. You do not know what it does. You just develop and that's it.
Wow.
So yeah, it would be
feeding
even
this machine, which you don't. So sometimes you don't even understand what features you're doing.
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
You know what you're doing in terms of bits, in terms of ones and zeros, but you don't know what you're doing in terms of overall, because these projects can be so big. Like these projects can be so enormously huge that you do not know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like you could be making an authentication API, right?
Yeah.
But what are you making an authentication API for? You have no idea. Or you're searching for a database, but what exactly for? You don't know.
I've heard something like that, but on a smaller scale. So these companies post an ad online for looking for employees, and they sort of offer a good salary, and then they give a coding test to all the applicants, and the coding test is massive, so like 3 hours, 4 hours of just coding, and then they're like, oh sorry, because they don't have to disclose how many people applied, blah blah, so they're like, oh sorry, you didn't, like we got a different candidate.
Yeah.
But what they actually do is they just take the code you wrote and
then use it.
Yeah, and use it. So if they manage it properly, if they split it into tasks, there was this one dude on YouTube who like even showed shared his. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, do you think he shared his experience? I watched him actually. Yeah, and it's like, oh, so I go on their website, I go to the source code, because that's how browsers render it. They just get the code, and I see my comments. Even his comments, and then he emailed them. So what they did was just like, oh, okay, so deleted the comments, but they never
emailed back.
Never emailed back. And it's like, wow, that is.
It's like code tests are fine, but when they're more than like 4 hours or more than even a couple hours, you should ask for compensation.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, if they're trying to do this scam and get the code, so they may as well just hire a programmer, but. So everyone's trying to take our freedoms everywhere.
They are.
Really? I sometimes don't even think
it's in everyone's best interest to take our freedoms away.
Maybe you're right. See, I don't even think about it sometimes. I like use Google Calendar, I do this, I do that, because like it's easy,
Yeah, but it's also easier to just use your own Nextcloud deployment, which you already have set up.
Yeah, I guess so.
Which also has exactly the same features.
Well, I have tried, and it's not as... I don't know, how do I put it, man? So that's the only thing, for freedom. You have to be willing to do some sacrifices. You have to be willing to give something up for
of course, because they make it convenient for you not to care about the freedom.
Yeah.
Whether that is monopolizing businesses or the government. Like if you don't care about what the government's doing and you just think of like, oh, let's protect the population against this spreading virus, then it's going to be more convenient for you not to care. It's going to be more convenient for you to just sit down.
Yeah, but do you think that people are now looking for help from the government? So, for example, this crazy virus, this pandemic is happening around.
Yeah.
And who best than the government can provide you with the hand of support?
To put it on the record, like I don't necessarily think that what they're doing is wrong. It's just it could be bad.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, that's probably the best thing they can do. But it's just you see certain things here and there that really make you wonder, like, what the hell is actually happening? Like, for example, in Germany, their Minister of Health, they basically just made the Minister of Health like the most powerful man in the country, or woman. I'm not sure what it is. And they even did things such as taking the what do you call it, the lockdown period, the quarantine period, where everyone is to stay at home. Instead of having it 30 days, they lengthened it to a whole year. So if they call, now I'm 99% sure I'm speaking about Germany, but I might be actually speaking about Hungary, but I think it's Germany. I know Hungary was doing some really bad stuff as well. But for example, their period of quarantine, at least they were trying to make it to be 1 year. I don't know if it was actually passed through. I think it was, though, sadly. And this is really bad for freedoms, because imagine if the virus lasts a year and then it just needs another month to pass off. Then what do you do for the rest of the 11 months? Where you're just supposed to shut your mouth and then expect the government to take it away by themselves? No, because technically, if you start going in the streets and rioting or whatever and saying like, yo, this is unjust, this is unfair, then they can technically take you and put you in prison because you've just broken the law.
Yeah.
Let me give you this analogy. The government can make it. The government can kill this virus overnight if they wanted to. Well, not really, but for the sake of it, let's say that they can. And then the way to do that would be to literally imprison each and every person and not let them do anything. Now there you go, problem solved. And then in this case, they also solved even more problems. No more drugs, no more killings, no more rapes.
Yeah.
Look, they've solved all the problems. Hey, it's Garden of Eden again.
Everyone's in prison.
Yes, so they can't do anything bad, and the virus can't spread. But is that good? No.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite an interesting one.
If anyone's actually interested, I honestly recommend that you read or at least look at 2 books. 1984 by George Orwell. Everyone already knows that one. However, there's another one, and I will need 1 second to remind myself.
Is it by George Orwell too?
No, it's not. It's by a Russian writer.
Oh.
And he was basically looking at he was describing what happened in USSR, basically.
Okay.
Gulag's Archipelago, I think it was called. I think I've heard something like that, yeah. No, I don't actually.
It's
Jordan Peterson was talking a lot about this book.
Yeah, it's by some sort of archipelago gulag. An experiment in literary investigation.
Yeah, the Gulag Archipelago, and it was written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn.
Fictional.
I'm not sure how to say it.
Novel. Okay.
Fictional.
Well,
where did you see that? Because from what I understand, it was meant to be. Yeah, it's Solzhenitsyn's own experience as a Gulag prisoner. Yeah. Basically, so he talked about a lot. He basically talked about how in the beginning he was for the Communist Party in Russia, and how he was a communist himself, and then X, Y, and Z happened, and he was describing the whole regime, and then he described getting thrown in Gulag because of stepping on the wrong, side.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't actually read them myself, but I know what they're about. And from what I understand, they're really good books.
Yeah, so
and they basically tell you what happened when you give the government too much power. Like, you can look in Russia's case as, right, the people revolted because the people were sick and tired of the Tsar, the last Tsar that they had, because the last Tsar kept going into wars and kept starving the population. And then they revolted against him. And they had noble intentions of let's redistribute the wealth so people don't starve. Now, some of them, like people saying like, oh no, the communists are bad because they were taking your property away. And that's what happened in the real world, yes. However, if you look at it from the prospect of a 1910s peasant in Russia that is starving of death in their farm, that isn't producing anything, or is producing stuff but it's being taken away by the Tsar. And it starts making sense because you're looking at those wealthy ass people eating and drinking and whoring and whatever else they were doing and enjoying themselves, and then you're looking at yourself and your family and you're starving. So and they also didn't have any other examples in the history of why communism wasn't bad. So they're like, right, let's try it. And Lenin, together with a bunch more people, just put the regime, and then all the peasantry gave them the power for it and supported them. And then what happened soon after? They were still starving anyways. But other than starving, they were also getting sent to gulags. They were also getting to be part of the glorious man-made famines that the USSR has had, and all of this kind of stuff.
But so, the idea, what about the idea itself?
The idea itself is flawed. Yeah. The idea is basically functioning on a subtext of you can rearrange human nature, which you cannot. Human nature is human nature, right? In fact, I can't remember what it was called, but Stalin had a scientist that basically created his own science. And the science was basically saying, right, what are human nature? They're not human nature, they're human constructs. And if they're human constructs, then you can deconstruct it and reconstruct it, creating the perfect Soviet man.
Ooh.
In this case, they were referring to things like greed and differentiations between different classes of people.
Yeah.
And hierarchies. Like, hierarchies are natural because you can literally observe it in the wild, right? And you can observe it in indigenous people, indigenous tribes as well. So they're normal things. They're not just, my bad capitalism created hierarchies. So in this case, they were saying like, right, let's try to take these human, quote, constructs, deconstruct them, and then reconstruct them again, so they're not as bad. And maybe they had good intentions to begin with, but it was a human experiment that resulted in too many deaths, and it was proven that you cannot deconstruct human nature. Because so the better way to do it is to just simply work around the inadequacies in human nature and try to implement the best system that actually accounts for them.
Yeah. What is the best? But no one knows, actually. We have capitalism now.
Yeah, capitalism is the worst system in the world apart from all of the others. That's a quote that I love. I can't remember who said it.
It's the worst apart from the others.
It's the worst system in the world apart from all the others. Yeah.
There's no good system.
There's no good system. It's only the lesser of all the evils, really. Yeah, because and the reason why I've always stood behind capitalism is because, one, we have a lot of good examples of them working. One being all of the Western countries, and even some second and third world countries. And two, you can look at more specific study cases like South Korea and Japan. They went from being completely obliterated after the Second World War to actually booming and being part of the First World War. Part of the first world countries.
World countries, yeah.
Yeah, and the advancement in shorter than 100 years is just amazing.
Is it because of their new regime?
It's because people were allowed to work hard. People were free to work hard and to work for their own things. Because if you know that you can put a lot of work into something, and then at the end you'll be able to enjoy the fruits of labor that you've put in, then you're gonna work hard. But if you know that all the work that you're putting in is going towards a cause that is just not wanted, then you're not going to put in the hard work.
No,
you can actually see this yourself in university. If you have some BS assignment that you really cannot see the point of at all, you'll be a lot less motivated to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, or even in secondary school. Some people are like that, you know.
Yeah. You just start realizing that it's sort of irrelevant, is it?
Yeah, 100%.
Don't care about it.
And it's irrelevant because you're not getting to enjoy any of the fruits of labor in terms of talking about communism. Yeah. Because you're told to work, and then the only thing, like even in a normal functioning communist system, the things that you'll be getting back, the fruits of your labor, will just be to be able to eat at the end of the day. But many times history has proven that isn't even the point, isn't even the outcome. Venezuela, for example, and then even for China, because many people say, "Oh, but look at China." China isn't communist, really. They're communism backed. No, they're socialism backed by capitalism, because all of their income is coming from a few areas. Some of them being, like, one of the really big ones being Shanghai, right? And that's a capitalist zone. That's a designated capitalist zone. Like, China has these designated capitalist zones, and all of their wealth are coming from those zones. So yeah, but like I kept saying, capitalism works simply because it's what humanity has evolved into.
At least for now.
Because it's been cured for hundreds and hundreds of years, rather than just having a dude that has a wacky beard and is a bit crazy deciding to think of something and then put it on the paper, and then like 100 years later have a dude take over a country and then, you know, but try to reenact his visions, you know.
God.
Like, maybe at some point we will have a guy that will make just overnight an ideology that is way better than anything we've seen, but just implementing it is not the way to do it. You have to evolve into it, which is the only way we've been able to get to socialism. And that's not really socialism that I'm talking about. It's still capitalism, but social reforms, that's actually a better way to put them as, is through slowly increasing the tax, like Nordic countries have been doing. Like, I think they've been reaching base level of 30% tax. And if you get up above a certain tax bracket, I think you can get all the way up to 60%. Like, that's fairly close to socialism, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the only way we've been able to reach there. But it's still not the best system, because you're working your ass off your entire life to reach a tax bracket that's high enough that you won't care about money, and then all of a sudden you're being taxed 60%.
Yeah, but the thing is, from what I've heard, you know, you can enjoy life in these countries, especially when you're old.
Oh no, you can.
Like, they care for people. They provide grants, for example. Now Norway, I don't know.
There are definitely good things about those countries. I'm not saying that they're bad to live in.
No, that's for sure. Yeah.
But I would rather prefer the route of more freedom.
Yeah.
And like, America does have its faults, but at the same time, it has a lot of really cool things about it. one thing, I don't know, maybe a final topic at this point, depends on the time now.
Yeah.
But one thing that no one ever says when they're talking about how America is dealing with the current pandemic is, yeah, America is technically surpassing Italy. But what they don't understand is that in order to be able to even realize that you're surpassing Italy, you need to be really well off, and you need to have a really good system in place in order to deal with the virus. So ergo, the better you are equipped to deal with this virus, the more cases you're going to have, because the more people are going to be able to test. The simple fact that they're able to test all of these people and get all of these numbers out says that they're the best country that are dealing with this pandemic. Maybe not the best, but at least one of the best.
Yeah.
Because many people are saying like, oh, look at their numbers. They're so high. They're really bad at dealing with it. No, look at Eastern Europe. They have numbers in tens. Eastern Europe, like Romania, I don't know if they have gone above 100, but last time I checked, which wasn't long ago, they weren't even above 100, or maybe they were just hovering around 100. That's not a lot of cases. But the reason the number is there is not because of that. The reason is the number is there is because people aren't getting tested.
Exactly.
So, like, people are saying, like, oh, we need socialist reforms in America so we can deal with the virus. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't, because the tax system that you have right now is currently able to deal with it. It could be better, yes, but it's still the best that we really have around right now.
Well, the system is not in its final form yet, that's for sure, but probably it's a bit hard to think about that, when we haven't really had a system change, like in my lifetime.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I was born.
The only thing we can do is look at history. Yeah, exactly.
You look at history, but then also the history that's written, it's sometimes
the history is written by it's written by the victors.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why it's really important to look at a lot of, like, the way I look at history is that, right, so I grew up in Eastern Europe, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up with the notion of Russia is bad, Russia equals bad, and America equals good. Because that's what Russia equals bad, and America plus Europe equals good. And that's what I've been told ever since I was a kid. And only not long ago, only a handful of years ago, I started, like, thinking for myself a little bit, which is important to do. No, I'm not necessarily saying that the past couple of things that I said are false. However, I started thinking for myself, and I started seeing both good and bad things in all three of these, in Europe, Russia, and America. And because being able to think for myself, I've been able to reason and justify all these things. Like, for example, I would always grow up being told, like, oh yeah, USSR is bad because they're tyrannical and they take your lands away. And then I came over here and I started talking to actual communists, and they were telling me, like, well, yeah, but that's because some corruption here and there, but this was the case and blah, blah, and maybe we can implement it better. And because I was just taking it for granted that USSR was bad, I started maybe thinking that, oh, maybe communism can be good. So what I needed to do is justify why Russia was bad or USSR was bad from my own mind. And I basically started looking into the whole, the actual reasons behind all of these opinions, basically. And rather than taking things at face value, understand why things are bad or why things are good. And I don't know, are we going for much longer?
Well, however you feel comfortable, I think we can...
I don't mind.
We can chat a bit about the main topic more, the freedoms.
Yeah.
And
to just quickly finish off the previous topic.
Yeah.
One thing that I found out for myself that's almost a rule is take the worst person that you can think of, whether that's in your personal life or in historic context, whether that is a dictator or a genocidal maniac or whatever he is or she. I'm not going to judge.
Or trans,
Yeah. And apply this rule to them. Try to think of a handful of things that are good about them.
So sort of, why would he be thinking that it's a good reason?
That's another route you can take as well, yes. But I mean, so for example, Stalin, right? Now we know why he's a bad guy, right? He killed so many people. He created a genocide in Ukraine and Moldova. And I don't mean created because of incompetence. I mean actually created, like man-made, in order to suppress the people of not Germany, the people of Ukraine.
Okay, so designed a genocide.
Yeah, basically designed. Now, this is a bit of a controversial topic in terms of some people disagree with this. But either way, we know he's a bad guy, right?
Yeah.
But some of the good things that he did was the whole space race. He was technically the first person to put a man in space. One example, yeah. And he was also a good leader. He was
Yeah, for sure. We can't deny that, you know.
A good leader in terms of pure skills, not necessarily that he was good for the people, but good for himself. He was a good selfish leader. You could say he was a good dictator. He
Yeah.
was good at dictating people around. But yeah, like whenever you hear someone say, "Oh, this person is bad" or "this person is good," you think about it. Okay, they said that this person is an angel, is a saint. I'm gonna try and find out what's bad about them, because it's impossible that he's literally a saint, or the other way around. They're saying that he's literally devil, right? I'm gonna try and figure out good things about him, because there's no way that someone did only bad or only or only good in their life.
Yeah, because otherwise, first of all, how did he end up there?
Yeah.
There's no way that, you know, he came to some sort of like a party meeting and said,
I'm taking over.
Yeah, I'm taking over, or like, give me the power because I want to rule the world, I want to kill these people, I want to do this, that. You know, there had to be, or at least some sort of a grand strategy when he did have his personal motivations, but then he was at least trying to, I don't know, dude, most of the leaders do have some good intentions. Maybe some of this false information, so another point, maybe that's false information that the person did something or something. Like, sure, there are things that are confirmed by many independent sources, then you know that, yeah, so this person did kill these people because, you know, everyone says that. And
when you start getting information such as person X is literally the devil and there's nothing good about him and he did all of this bad stuff, then you should start doubting that source, because
it's very biased.
Yeah, that's a very biased opinion, and you should like drill deeper into it. Now, this is actually one of the reasons why everyone has been shying away from talking about the big H that used to rule Germany in the Second World War. And the reason why they shy away from him, or shy away from talking about him, is because, no one wants to bring up this devil because it's going to radicalize more people. And I'm not here to say that that's not true, but let's say that even if they are true, which I doubt that.
Well, I did hear this argument. Yes, sure.
Yeah, you can't dismiss this. You can't dismiss them, because you need to learn from them. Because if you don't, then they'll rise up again. If you don't learn from your own mistakes, and if you don't point out what the mistakes were, then there will be more people like that.
Yeah. I suppose that's a point too, and also it's just a fact, you know. As long as you keep shying away, you're not gonna progress at a
because
pace.
In this case, the allies managed to patch that gaping wound, right? They managed to patch it, but they didn't. They might have not necessarily fixed it, if that makes sense. So maybe this wound will just reopen again. So rather than just simply patching it blindly and not actually treating it, then it might even make it worse. You know, don't fix the symptoms, fix the cause. And in this case, killing the big H wasn't finding the cause and curing it, was just, curing the symptom.
Yeah, this sort of false.
Because if one person like that came around before, then there will surely be more, and we need to look at the reasons why those kind of people came around.
Yeah,
and we've actually have been seeing a bit of an uprising in Europe from these kind of far right groups
who are supporting the big H.
Yeah, well, not necessarily supporting him, but basically taking his ideologies.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I mean,
like we started seeing that even before Brexit.
Wow.
Some of the earliest times I remember seeing it was back in 2014 when Russia started to do their invasion of Ukraine. And I started because some of those people manifested themselves in Ukraine, fighting for Ukraine. And I've actually seen, I believe it was Vox, they were doing like a daily vlog in the actual conflict. And they were going around different militia groups that were defending Ukraine and basically doing like daily vlogs of them. And I remember at some point they actually stopped by a group of skinheads that were obvious that they were, let's just say, a bit far right.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's basically like, I mean, you've always had them around because you can't kill an idea.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a surge of them for the past few years.
Oh.
And yeah.
As long as it's non-violent, I support free speech as much as it's
same.
It's sometimes an evil, because now, if we start speaking openly about issues like that, some people may get offended and they start to, prosecute or whatever, because I don't know, just this, I don't like this speech or something, but free speech should be the basis of all conversations, and you should objectively, obviously, it's hard for some people because they look at certain things from the emotional point. So they get very emotional about certain things, but facts don't care about emotions. I mean, as much as this sounds harsh, but if you try to be objective, if you try to stay objective, especially when looking at this dark history, and we already had a podcast episode on the dark history and on the China situation, and if you start digging deeper to learn more, I think that conversations should be encouraged about anything.
Yeah, they really should, because
that's why we even do it here. Exactly, that's the, because otherwise everyone's.
And it's also important to specifically have freedom of speech, and that's not necessarily freedom from consequence. It's freedom from legal consequence.
Yeah, you're not supposed to shout racial slurs. That's not a thing to do.
You should technically legally be allowed to do it.
If that's the freedom of speech, yes. However, but that is an assault on.
Well, it's not an assault because that's subjective. When I go to your face and say the C word, or the N word or whatever word, right?
Yeah.
I basically just cause offense, but offense is subjective.
Okay.
I've taught myself out of it. I've taught myself out of it in terms of, if someone comes to my face and gives me the C word, I'm just gonna laugh. Like I don't care if someone tries to offend me. Like they need to know me on a personal level to be able to offend me.
Yeah, obviously,
because that I did myself.
If they're coming at you like that, they usually are emotionally, heated. So maybe they didn't like something that you did, and then they come at you, they start like shouting or whatever, and you know that they're not being objective, and that they would probably, after like 30 minutes or so, when they calm down, they would even probably if you're getting in an argument, I mean, they're probably gonna calm down and would say, oh, sorry, I didn't even mean that, so like.
Like it depends on the kind of person, because most of the times, if it's just a random stranger, if they do that, I'm just gonna be like, okay, I don't care about them. Why should I care about them?
First of all, you don't even know if the person is clinically healthy or sane.
Exactly. So like what I was saying is that you should have the right to say literally anything, because the moment you don't is the moment you start policing yourself. And then if you start saying things like, oh, you shouldn't be allowed to say the N word, and then you actually put a legal rule on that means that there's already one example of the government infringing on someone's right of freedom of speech, and then they can further on make it even worse and expand that law to some other things.
Yeah.
So like, right, okay, you cannot say the N word. If you say the N word, 2 years in prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
From there, I can start to expand the law and make it more like, right, you cannot speak negatively of the black people.
Yeah.
Oh, you spoke negatively of the black people, 2 years in prison.
Mm.
So like these kind of laws are very flexible usually. And laws in general are very flexible, since why you have loopholes. So then they will flex themselves out of the boundaries of it. And governments will be able to like bend them back and forth in order to make you fit inside the boundaries and then throw you in prison. So this is why you need to have an absolute freedom of speech, because otherwise it just doesn't fly.
Yeah,
and the other side of it, what's happening right now is that, oh, you cannot offend people. Well, what does offense mean?
Yeah, as we just discussed, it's very subjective, exactly.
Subjective, yeah.
See, even the N-word, okay?
Yeah.
So,
oh, you disagreed with me. You offended me. Go to prison.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what?
So this N-word has been thrown around, like...
By breathing in my presence, you offended me. Go to prison right now.
Yeah. So, for example, this word is, well, technically the worst word that we know around, now. Just everyone's just
at least in the Western world, yeah. Because back home, they don't really care about this word.
yeah, that's why I also wanted to bring this point. But so if this word wasn't censored, and it would be like you would be allowed to speak it loudly, why would you even say, it's the same with the fruit of
it's not
of
about
Eden.
being able to, it's not about saying it's about being able to say
and it's not even about the word itself, because for example,
you should have consequences for saying certain things.
Yes,
but those consequences shouldn't be legal consequences. Those consequences should be like, oh, you are just really rude to my friend, I'm not going to speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Or a consequence of saying my mind out loud could be someone else debating me, right? Someone else practicing the freedom of speech, saying why they think I'm wrong, and then shutting down my argument.
Yeah.
And then guess what? Freedom of speech also means that I can do that back to them.
Yeah, that's why freedom of speech is nice.
Yeah.
Because you put your guns down, and that's why, like, I don't encourage violent behavior, like at all.
I don't either.
But the conversation should be your weapon. Like, you should. Oh, and also 100%. Obviously you have to be objective and everything, and you have to consider the argument, so it doesn't.
Well, no, you don't have to do anything. You just need to be able to talk like a normal person.
Well, yes, but you should
not attack people.
Yeah, not attack people. But the thing is, you should consider everyone's opinions, and at least, entertain them a bit in your mind, and then, like, forget about if you don't like it. But
idealist can't speak. Ideologically, yes, you should do that, but practically no one's going to do that, and only a certain amount of people will be able to even do it to an extent. Because even if you think that you can entertain weird thoughts in your head, to some level you'll still be very biased, because you cannot remove bias.
Well, we're striving for it.
Yeah, we are.
That's what this podcast is about. It's about trying to educate ourselves first, and then maybe other people who gets inspired by that, to look for the truth. Always check your facts, because every time we did an episode, we always end with like a little sentence or a thing that sums up the episode. And we could be sort of already moving to wrapping up this episode.
Yeah.
So what did we get out of it? Freedom. There should be freedom.
For yourself.
Thinking for yourself. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. For
yourself and ask right questions. Yeah.
That's a very good one.
All these things.
Because first of all, you have to check facts wherever it's coming from. I've been to this little seminar of fake news. There was a dude who gave a presentation on fake news. He apparently is an expert in that field. He's being hired by news sources. He's getting hired by historians, like organizations. And his job is literally look for clues, do loads of research, check one fact like million of different sources. Just that's his job. I wouldn't want to do that, but it was interesting to see how there's so many weird little quirks and clues. And
you see, I have a problem with this, and I have a problem with this because how do you know that person doesn't have their biases? Everyone has their biases, and with the right hand maneuvering those biases, you can end up with a fact checker that's actually biased themselves. So it's not like, I don't think that we should be doing. We should have like organizations doing the fact checking for us. I think that we should just use our own brains, because people would just blindly believe whatever they see on their Facebook feed. Or blindly believe what they see. No, but you can't fact check.
But you know why I'm like, saying
on
this.
On the general notion, I guess you could fact check. Oh, this random website says that God exists. Now let me go on Wikipedia. Now, that's a bad example, but like you can generally do some very basic fact checking.
But the person,
however,
you can't
because it's still very
how you're supposed to at least try and check. So it's not as if they are giving you the the definitive answer, saying this post is fake, this post is this, that. It's just giving you the skepticism and the criticism, so you could criticize certain things and be more
just
skeptical.
Take everything with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, even these authorities on fact checking, because like even those guys will not be 100% right, and even the guys that, like, you go and buy a book and you think, oh, everything in this book is real because it was published by X author, and it was written by X author and published by X publisher, and it was actually put on the shelves. That means it was real. But no, what if someone that had enough money got that writer to write their information and got the publisher to publish their book?
Yeah.
Like, that's why I keep saying, think for yourself and don't just believe everything blindly.
Yeah, because there's some people who have specific sources which they say, like, this is the whole, like, even the Bible. Yeah, there are some people who only look for answers in the Bible, and then if anything that you say doesn't meet with what they read in the book. And it's just one example, because there are some radical Christian people, and I don't care about anyone, it's like you're free to do whatever you want, but then they don't think that any other sources of information are valid. They are only tunnel visioned to one source of information, and they become, I don't know what's the best word for it. It's agnostic, but that's not it. Believes that nothing is true. Well, essentially, they're starting to block out all the information from elsewhere.
They take it as an absolute truth, yes.
Yeah, they take something like that. So,
and yeah, that's actually another good point, because I personally believe the Bible to be a very good book, because not because of everything is literal truth, but more because it's a metaphorical truth.
Yeah.
And it tells you how to behave. Because I don't think that you can look at the Bible stories as stories that explain humanity and stories that explain the human minds more specifically. Like, for example, the example with freedom that I brought at the beginning of the show. That's a very good thing as well. Another one would be the story of Cain and Abel, and how one brother killed another because he was jealous of him. Now, this explains the point of jealousy and the point of unjust ruling, because God gave him, he couldn't sacrifice anything good enough to God because God didn't give him the right role, right? I can't remember exactly how it goes, but whatever. It gives you a lot of these kind of stories that let you know how the human mind works, not necessarily historic
things are very,
stuff.
They're very valid.
They're very valid, yeah. So people would take it and bend them. And bend them around and take them as different truths. Point of view is also important. They will take their own interpretation of truth out of a piece of text or media, you know?
Yeah, I believe we already had an episode on how different texts from different times in history have to be interpreted differently. For example, even, I'll have to look into it again, but the amendments in the Constitution of the United States is a bit, isn't it a bit outdated? As much as you would say the country itself wasn't formed too long ago, but there must be updated. Last amendment was 1992. Yeah.
Well, they are being changed here and there, but I wouldn't say that it's outdated.
But it's been operating like that. For example, even the elections.
What about them?
It's been operating ever since 1788. That's when it was ratified, executive.
In my opinion, it's not broke. And then if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Well, but the thing is, times change. There weren't computers back then. There weren't...
What do computers have to do with this?
Well, times change. You have to introduce new measures of... I don't even know. Do you get the general idea of what I'm trying to say?
A computer is just a tool, man. Just because a tool was invented doesn't mean you should go back and revise. The thing is, the whole point of something like constitutional amendments is that they're set in stone. Because if you can change them easily, then what's there to stop from a radicalist getting elected through charisma or whatever other tools, and then going and changing them to his own motive? The whole point of these is sure, they might not be flawless. In fact, I'm 100% sure they're not flawless. But the whole point of these is that they're set in stone, so you cannot change them. Because if they're easy to change, then they're going to be easily changed for the worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's just probably I got lost in my point where.
I think I might have watched the episode where you talked about that.
Yeah, there was a specific thing which I can't.
Was it about
recall.
Gun control by chance? Because that's usually what people talk about.
I think it was about women's rights and slavery and things where people take these texts out of context and start quoting them by saying that. Okay. And these texts are so old. Women can vote now. Slavery is abolished. First of all, it was a horrible thing. But
yeah, because some people are even saying it's my right to own an N-word, right?
Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, that's
as much as you can read the I don't know. Probably the thing is I haven't read the original Constitution, but I'm sure that, and the computer as an invention was just one of my other examples, that things are coming slowly, the systems are changing, and these documents shouldn't be taken out of context, and you have to look at the era at which it was written.
Yeah, but then people also start making the arguments of freedom of speech and gun control, because those two things are in the amendments. There's the First Amendment that talks about guns, I believe, and then the Second Amendment that talks about freedom, or the other way around. I think it's actually the other way around. First Amendment that talks about freedom of speech, and the second one about gun control, or something along those lines. I don't remember anymore. But yeah, like they're there for a reason. You can't just change them, because if you can't just change them, then that means the whole point of having a constitution is no more. And yeah, you should practice a bit of caution, a bit of, well, actual thinking. So like, you can't just let someone get away with slavery by saying it's my right to own a black person.
Yeah.
You know, because that's actually flawed thinking.
Yes.
But yeah.
Gotta free your mind from all of these biases and
well, no, you can't. You just formulate your own biases that are a bit better with the current narrative.
Yes.
Because the human mind is not a computer.
You have to try.
It's not a CPU.
You have to try, though.
Trying is, yeah, but I don't believe you shouldn't have your own bias, because not having a bias is basically saying that you shouldn't have an opinion, which is, again, flawed thinking. What you should do is you should be aware of your bias.
Yeah, and here we go. That's the best thing. Be aware of your own bias when looking at something else.
Yeah, and then you'll start slowly noticing other people's biases. So
yeah, that's a good one. I think that's how we should end this episode today.
Yeah, I agree.
Last words. Learn to think.
Yep.
Be aware of your own bias when looking at other biases and other things. That's I think that's a good last sentence for it. Right,
yeah, this is definitely a long one.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me.
And I'll sure want to have you some next time on here.
Sure. Give me a shout.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening, and see y'all later.